Welcome back to the Professional Learning Series on providing culturally responsive instruction for Native American students. This Professional Learning Series includes the following sections: the what and why of culturally responsive instruction, understanding culture and Native American diversity, foundations for a culturally responsive practice, where to start, some initial guidelines for instruction, going further, more guidelines, pedagogical implications by subject area, and action steps towards developing a culturally responsive practice. This video focuses on pedagogical implications by subject area. The prior video looked at pedagogical implications for math, science, and social studies. This video looks at ELA, native languages, and provides a problem place-based scenario. The recommendations here are based on research and theory that has specifically focused on these subject areas. First, we'll turn to English language arts. To expand on the idea expressed in an earlier video, it is important to include literary themes written by and about Native Americans. Jacqueline Jones Royster, a writer on cultural studies, asserts that it is critical for members of particular communities to speak for themselves. Most people get their information about Native Americans written by non-Native people. Much of this work is very general or contains inaccurate portrayals of Native America. In contrast, including Native authors in the curriculum supports the exploration of diversity among Native Americans, as each author conveys individual and communities' experiences at specific times, places, and tribes, each different from one another. Story is an important mode of learning for Native students. As Laura Tohe states, at the heart of Indigenous belief comes expression of songs, prayers, and stories that bring us to learn where we came from, who we are, and our paths towards greater knowing. Judith Ortiz Coffer, a contemporary Puerto Rican author, adds, "Literature is the human search for meaning." When reading about a particular tribe that is unfamiliar to your students, it will help if you support their reading experience by providing background information about that particular tribe, its culture, social structures, history, and current status. While this may seem obvious, it's worth noting that students in one tribal community may not be familiar with the background and details of other tribes. In addition, look to various forms of literature by Native authors, such as novels, short stories, poetry, and essays by Native American writers. Other relevant forms of text may include film, websites, narratives, and historical documents. Analyzing these texts is a means to help students make sense of the world, ask questions, and think critically. In keeping with the concept of providing relevant learning experiences for students, connect learning in ELA to real-life experiences. Ensure students engage in those critical text-to-self experiences. Provide opportunities for expressive practices, such as speaking and writing, that include a real reason for students to express themselves and real audiences for them to express themselves to. That is, provide learning experiences where they feel a connection to the content and have something to say about it. Also, share a rationale for choosing a particular format with students, or engage in a conversation with students about it. For example, why express oneself in a poem versus a letter to an editor? Why make a speech versus writing a short story? As students begin to see the benefits of one form of expression over another in particular contexts, they can take more agency over communicating their ideas and creativity. Literary analysis may need to be scaffolded in a variety of ways. Of course, start with where students are currently in their understanding. Consider ways they may already be using literary analysis in their daily lives with everyday text. These may be with stories, songs, jokes, or other forms of expression. In other words, ask yourself how students' everyday practices map onto literary skills and modes of reasoning. Find similarities between the modes to support students in bridging the two. Dr. Carol Lee conducted an interesting study where she tried to do just this. She wanted to see the results of activating students' cultural knowledge when they were interpreting instances of signifying, a form of discourse in the African American community that contains irony, double entendre, satire, and metaphorical language. Here's an example of signifying by Mitchell Kernan that Lee shares with us. It is a conversation between two sisters. One sister has tried to hide the fact that she is pregnant from the other. In this example of signifying, the purpose is to instruct and inform. It's not a joke meant to insult, which signifying can also be used for. Rochelle admonishes her sister for not telling her about her pregnancy. The figurative language in Rochelle's final response is symbolic and invokes a playful attitude towards language. In Lee's study, students applied the cognitive processes they used in signifying to literature written by African Americans. Students who participated in this instruction, where they connected their everyday cognitive processes, sense-making, and cultural knowledge to literary analysis of complex texts, were much more adept than their peers who received standard instruction. The goal of the instructional model was to support students as they developed reading comprehension strategies that they could then apply to any type of literature. Next, we'll talk about teaching native languages. When teaching native languages, it's important to teach them within a meaningful and authentic context. Activities students are engaged in should require the use of the target language, such as when creating and using traditional objects, speaking with an elder, and participating in a traditional celebration. In keeping with tribal goals for their children, many recommend teaching native language in the context of traditional cultural activities, a natural place for the language to be used. This combination also supports students to develop their cultural knowledge. In learning their language in traditional contexts, students learn about the appropriate uses of the language, how to use it with different community members, and also gain an understanding of the significance of cultural practices. The process of teaching native language is also the perfect opportunity to engage the local community, in particular elders. In traditional Native culture, elders are highly valued for carrying and conveying cultural knowledge, and as the primary holders of native language. Teachers can invite elders to come to the classroom to tell stories and talk with students. It is also recommended that students be taken out to the community to talk with elders in their own settings. Here are some students talking about why learning their native language is important to them. Since I started learning my language, I feel more connected to my community, my people, our doings, our land, especially my great-grandma. I want to learn about my language to make sure my younger sisters and brothers can speak it. I have to start with myself. It's hard because it's not spoken in my home. These student responses were gathered by the Indigenous Language Institute. Lastly, we know that language is among the most powerful mediators of knowledge, values, and thinking processes, so learning one's native language also supports understanding of native epistemologies, values, and cultural norms. Next, we'll consider an example that illustrates some of the guidance we've provided in this section in the context of problem place-based learning. Setting learning in problem or place-based scenarios is a good strategy for making it authentic and relevant. Further, by integrating and spanning multiple subject areas, problem and place-based learning scenarios also connect with Native culture's view of the world and their experience as connected and interdependent. This example draws on students' home community. Students use their knowledge and skills to work on solving real problems their communities face. In this example, a group of collaborating middle school teachers hold conversations with various community members to help them focus the unit. They want to gain an understanding of important current issues in the community. Based on these conversations, the teachers decide on the unit's problem statement and the question that will be posed to students. Students will work in groups to find a solution to the problem. The problem statement is, your community would like to grow enough fruits and vegetables for the entire community. The related question is, what plan can you come up with to get the community close to their goal? This scenario was developed as a result of one community member's comment that the community currently only grows enough food to feed 1 or 2 families, but in the past they grew enough for everyone. They'd like to do that again. In this classroom, students are already used to working in collaborative groups. In their groups and with scaffolding as needed from their teachers, students first discuss what they need to know to solve the problem in each of a number of areas. Then they formulate a set of questions. Each person in the group then takes a question and leads the research to answer that question. This may entail new learning that students need to accomplish in order to answer the question. For example, students need mathematics to figure out how much fruit and vegetables need to be grown and how much land is required to grow it. To do this, they need to consider how many people are in the community and how much fruit and vegetables each should eat daily to be healthy. They also need to consider how much land is needed to grow this amount and how much is available. Answering these questions can include fairly simple calculations at the elementary school level and more complex algebra and geometry at the secondary level. Mathematics could also be involved in other types of questions that are important to solving the scenario problem. For example, what kinds of fruits and vegetables do people like to eat? And how much experience do community members have with growing this food? Asking and answering these questions can involve doing a survey to gather data and using statistics and graphing to analyze results. Students also collect stories from community members and elders to better understand their community's traditions around food. Students ask, are these traditions ongoing? If not, what happened? What is the status today? In collecting these stories, students also collect a variety of different types of stories about food in their community, including, for example, planting, harvesting, and the natural environment. They consider the role of the oral tradition in their community. Students work together to discover what makes a traditional story they hear effective in carrying its message. Is it funny, scary, or sad? Then they develop their own stories about plants based on what they've heard and their understanding of what makes a traditional story powerful. For science, students can study the types of conditions various fruits and vegetables need to grow. What is the needed microbial condition of the soil? What amounts of water and sun are needed for optimal plant health? What are the mechanisms at work in plants producing their fruit and vegetable components? Depending on the age of the students, the types of questions students would be answering would change. As students work on different phases of the project, they post their work on a shared project wall in the classroom for others to learn from. For example, the questions they generate, the methods they decide on, and the initial findings. Students also ask questions and provide feedback to one another in person and in the form of post-its on the project wall. With this public knowledge, student groups can learn from and support one another as the work progresses. This creates shared classroom knowledge and supports equity in the classroom. To culminate the project, students present their group's plan in a multimedia presentation. Students present their projects in a format of their choice to classmates, parents, and invited community members. This gives students further opportunities to strengthen their presentation skills and provides an opportunity to celebrate students' work. To end the unit, students also write up their individual learning journeys, highlighting new learning and important takeaways about the project. In doing this work, students are able to utilize a variety of disciplinary skills they've learned across content areas. They also can connect meaningfully with their communities and feel the empowerment that comes from helping to solve a problem their families and neighbors face. Students also get the experience of working as a team member, developing skills in collaboration, listening, compromising, leading, and expressing their own opinion. Lastly, it provides an opportunity to celebrate students' work. Now for some exit questions. What are one or two strategies from this video you can start using in your class or program? What is an example of a problem place-based project you could use with students? We are grateful to the following individuals for their contributions to these modules.